Hello everyone and welcome to the FMX. My name is Valentin Heinrich and I am a 3D artist based in Berlin. I create animations like this one. And as you already can see, I like to make landscapes. I like to create digital sculptures like a weird machine like this one. And I'm also working on abstract gradients. This is my first presentation ever, so thanks a lot to Maxon and especially to Karan for making this possible. Today closes a bit of a circle for me, as the FMX was back in 2016 my first conference that I ever visited. So I'm very thankful for the opportunity to talk to you here today. Details matter. How to find the artistic voice in 3D. That's the title of my presentation. And I can't speak for others, but I can show you my personal way into 3D so far. And I think developing a personal style is one of the most crucial parts of being an independent artist or being a freelance designer. Because only if you do that, you can go out with what you do, you can make sure you will get hired for what you like to do. And more importantly, only in that way you can truly express yourself and show the world who you are and what you have to say. Now I want to show you who I am. On social media I am this guy with this weird name. I call myself Huna. And if you're wondering where that weird name comes from, it's from this movie. And it's very famous burger place, Big Kahuna Burger. So please no judging for that. I was a teenager and it was the only good movie that I knew, and I thought it would be a cool reference for that. When I'm telling you who I am, I also want to tell you where I come from, because as you know already now, details matter, and I think that's a very important detail of everybody. Where are we coming from and how are we shaped by our surrounding, especially as a child? So I was born and raised in this beautiful little village that is here on the left. It's called Hohenberg, which means as much as high mountain, super high mountain with a little church on top. It's a village with 500 people, just a 1-hour drive away from Stuttgart. And as you can imagine, it's a very quiet surrounding, a lot of forest, agriculture, and a lot of meadows and lakes, and of course other villages. And I say compared to the life I'm living now in Berlin, it's the complete opposite. At least within Germany. And I try to be there a few times a year. I still have a lot of friends and family there. So, and even though people are always super busy there with all kind of crafty projects like building little shacks for their lawnmower or anything else, I feel like time there is always standing a bit still. After I finished school, and after I did my civil service, I didn't really know what to do. I actually had the plan to study graphics design, but I was too lazy to make an application folder for that. Today I know I was just afraid of being declined for that. So to bridge that uncertainty, I worked in a car paint shop. And we would fix up cars that had accidents like this one. And we were doing all the stuff at the for the car bodies to repair them and to do the painting and polishing. And if we did a good job, you would drive home with the car like this. But why am I telling you this? We're actually here for 3D. But what I learned there was what it means to have high quality standards when you work. It's in this craft, every single mistake will show in the end result. And if you take a look at that, it's not so different from 3D, where you put your stuff into rendering and every mistake that you did before will show. You have points of no return, otherwise you would just have to do the whole job all over again. And I thought about making this my job. But through a coincidence, I heard about the audiovisual media program at the Hochschule der Medien, the University of Media here in Stuttgart. So I applied for that, of course, on the very last day possible with express postal service. I was super stressed and threw in the application. And they took me. So finally I was able to make the move to the big city of Stuttgart. And before I started there, I thought that would be me, walking in there like this cool dude from the countryside. But it turned out that that was me. trying the dab. There were so many cool people in our program. We were like 60 people, and everybody seemed to know what they wanted to do. They had some experience, had some internships or whatever. I had no clue whatsoever, and I didn't even know how to speak proper German then, because I come from a place where you speak a very strong dialect. So you can imagine standing me, at least in the beginning, I was the Swabian guy standing in the corner, being quiet, smoking cigarettes. That was me. Hiding in plain sight is the title of this piece that I made, and that shows pretty well how I felt. So the first semesters were full of theoretical knowledge, physics, electronics, mathematics, programming, all super tough for me. But we were also watching classic movies. And after three semesters, we were allowed to make our own projects. And luckily, I got to work on a science fiction movie as a semester project. It was called Another World. I made the title animation, and also I designed and animated this head-up display. And I don't think you can see all the details here, but there's some contents of different chemicals and the distance to the Earth and the next possible planet that is also looking like the Earth. So we made a real whole project there with a lot of world building and established that in the movie. And this animation took me about a month back then. But I started from zero knowledge, and we were super happy back then. And I had the opportunity to do a variety of different projects during my studies, and that helped me a lot to shape my vision of where I wanted to go. And also I was introduced into a program called Cinema 4D by a flatmate, and I will show you my first rendering later that I did. I wonder if you can tell that. And the most important part of studying for me was my internship at a little studio called Block Studio in Berlin. It was only a two-man studio, and they pushed me fully into 3D. And I had an amazing time there. I learned a lot. They went super easy on me. I had time to arrive. I had time to take a look at tutorials. And I was actually very surprised how they were also still watching tutorials, a ton of tutorials. And that was not what I had expected, actually. And I was living in a little side apartment with an old couple outside of the city, and they didn't even have internet at their place. So the only thing that I could do was downloading tutorials during the day, taking them home, and continue working until I went to bed. And so in this half year, I learned incredibly much. And after finishing that, I still had to finish my studies, of course. So I moved back to Stuttgart, and you can imagine me sitting crying in the train, really, because I was so sad to leave the place in Berlin. And then I also started freelancing for them. They were still approaching me if I can help them out on a few projects. So I still had to finish my studies, and one day after handing in my bachelor's thesis, which was a total disaster, I started to freelance full-time. I was approached by an agency here in Stuttgart, and so I handed my thesis in, and on the very next day I packed my PC up into a little smart car-to-go and drove to the agency, and then I started freelancing. And it was my first project, and I was like, okay, studying is over, this crap is over, new chapter, let's go, now I'm gonna make some money, and it's gonna be as beautiful as my internship was. But it turned out it was, again, a complete disaster there. Super stressful project, very big industrial client, and we just made an image video with some stock footage. But I almost didn't make it. But it was a start for me to freelance, and since then I'm freelancing. That was back in end of 2016. And from today's perspective, this naive attitude that everything would be easy sounds really ridiculous to me. And the first years were pretty tough. I was taking on every single project, every 2D, 3D project, no matter what. I just had to make the money. And it took some time for me to gain confidence and to say no to a project. The first time, 4.5 years ago. So I do that up until today, and since 2020 I call myself a 3D artist. But I'm not here to talk about more commercial and client projects that I'm still doing. I want to talk about my art practice and the artworks that I'm creating in 3D. And it has become a big, big part of my life to express myself in that medium. And it's for me a way to turn my in an emotional life outside and to communicate who I am. And I'm currently really at the state where I can sit down and just go to let go of every technicalities and just create without thinking and just get lost in the process. Let's talk about one of the biggest terms in the creative industry. It's, of course, inspiration. And in these times with social media, you're flooded with so many cool projects, with so much information. So it should be easy to feel inspired, right? You just take the approach from this project and mix it with a technique from the other one, and then you have some new aesthetics and you have a cool project. But for me, that is not how it works. When I'm on social media, and I'm on Instagram way too much, but when I am there, I often feel totally overwhelmed by the projects of others. I am in this passive role, in a state of consumption, doom scrolling through Instagram, and yeah, the problem is that makes me feel very small and very stupid. So I try to overcome this feeling and to get into a different state of observation. But what does that mean? For me, it means to be aware of the situations and the motives that catch my attention. I try to stay mentally awake as much as possible and to see the little moments and the things that speak to me. And then, of course, it's very important to document that. So I always have my smartphone with me, of course, and also a little book where I am writing stuff down. So otherwise, I will just forget about it. And an even better term to put this would be self-observation. So I'm trying to sit on my own shoulder and tell to myself, hey, you're looking at these stones here, you like them, and there's a reason for it. And that really helps me to dig into these thoughts and into that knowledge, and that helps to shape my artistic voice. So most of the times I'm sitting there like this, maybe not so sad, but that can happen. And if that happens, of course, it's also important for me to go into conversations with my girlfriend or friends and to talk about life, I don't know. For me, that is the way to find new ideas for artworks that help me to understand the world around me and also the world within me. And if you haven't noticed yet so far, I like stones. I like stones, I like rocks, I like everything that has to do with stones. And I can't really tell you why I love them so much, but there is something in this beauty, in this uniqueness of these lifeless, millions of years old objects, random objects, but every single one is so individual. And that kind of, I don't know, it catches me. And as I said, I'm talking also with friends about it, and the images here on the left, I got sent by a friend, so the good thing is when you talk to your friends, they will send you images like these. The other ones are from me. These are just some random images that I take during my daily life. And it's all about this, I'd say, interplay between humans and nature and what we try to do with nature and what nature does with us. And as you can see, I also like trash that is laying around and somewhere else and making nice compositions. And I'm also a big fan of recycling. So giving meaning to objects that were thrown away by others, that is something that I really like. And it's I try to save up things, and I wish I had a bigger place so I could save up even more stuff. So for example, also my whole apartment is full of used furniture. Most of them I found it on the street here in Stuttgart back then. And I like to fix that up and build new things, and yeah, that's also a very big part of me. When I walk through the streets in Berlin, especially in the morning when I drive to work or in the evening, very often these moments of light are happening. The light is shining through between buildings and then forming patterns and compositions, and brings really poetry into the most ordinary places of the town. And I try to imitate stuff like that in my works. By the way, these stones are from Italy. I brought them home, I scanned them, I got myself a little photogrammetry set up, and I brought them into 3D and made a little series with that. And I try to capture compositions like these. I try to get rid of the, as I call it, the child's eye, trying to make sense of everything and to understand everything around us. And it's really like when you're pinching your eyes just to have an overview of shapes. I try to do that with my brain, if that makes sense. But the top right image there, I took that during a vacation in Sweden and Norway, where we were driving around in a camper van on the road to nowhere. And it was really just this one single second, oh man, this field looks nice. And having photos like that helps me a lot to create compositions for myself. And as you have so many possibilities in 3D, you know, you have light sources as much as your PC can handle, and with a little fake here and a little post-production there. And it can lead you to taking, I'd say, some sort of shortcuts and fixing things up improperly. And I do that also way too often, but my current goal is to restrict myself and to give myself some rules. And I think that frame really helps to thrive creativity and to make something new and to learn something new and to go into detail. So for this particular piece, I only used one light source, the Redshift Sun Skyrig, and just tried to play with light and shadow. Speaking of light, speaking of the sun, I like sunsets. And I mean, who doesn't? And I really enjoy these moments of standing still, enjoying the situation, being without distraction or anything, and just be there. But what is it that is so beautiful about sunsets? And now it might get a bit too cheesy for you if it wasn't before. But for me, it's really the duality of things. It's the ups and downs in life, and that everything is constantly in motion. And let me show you a theory that I heard in a talk some years ago. I unfortunately don't remember who it was. The creative gap. And maybe some of you heard of it already, but for those of you who didn't hear about it, I want to explain it. For that, I made this beautiful graph here. So let's say you have a ton of photos and you have developed a certain taste and your taste is good and you want to start and you want to express that in 3D. So you go online, you download Cinema 4D, and you start, and then you will make something like this. This is my very first rendering, back from 2013. It's called Untitled 3, so maybe there had to be 2 versions before it. And I followed a tutorial by an account that was called Photoshop Help German. And it was a very good tutorial. It was apparently quite easy to follow. And I did everything exactly like he said. And I made even more. I rotated the spray can. Sorry, so back to the graph. This here is the creative gap. So that can be super frustrating. You really have something in your mind that you want to create, but you're just not able to because you don't have the skills. So after making this first rendering, I put C4D in the digital drawer and just let it rot there for a while. But as I told you already, during the internship, I got into it again and kept going. And when you keep on going, the work will get better eventually. So I played around with soft bodies and X particles and the cloth solver. And I learned a bit about shading and how to loop an animation, which is a very important thing for me to make looping animations. And then practice will make your skill better and will get the gap a bit smaller. And the more techniques you learn, the better you will get. I was trying to learn as much as I was getting into my brain. So I was learning about triplanar mapping, volume modeling, composition, camera settings, and then also Redshift. And when you try out different things, sometimes mistakes happen. So this approach happened through just some bad camera bokeh settings and a very noisy render. But I kind of liked the aesthetics and put it into Photoshop and did a little color correction, and I liked the way where this was leading to. So I kept on going and just played around with it and created some new abstract pieces that is like an antidote for me compared to the very precise 3D work that I most of the time do. So I think this guy was right after all. We don't make mistakes, we just have happy accidents. And you see where this is going to, the gap gets smaller and smaller and smaller. But you will never get there that your work really matches your taste that you have. And the graph is a bit, or way too basic to match the whole creative gap concept, because of course we're always moving and our taste is developing and moves into different directions. So it's really depending on the choices that we make, what do we want to learn, and sometimes it's just pure luck. But to have that chance and to have that luck, you gotta do the work at least. And the more techniques you know, the more you're able to connect the dots. And in my case, it's cool to have these abstract pieces that I can then bring back into 3D again and make little exhibitions like this one, at least digitally. And of course, you can always put it into a rocky desert landscape. That always works. And what you just saw was now a bit fast forward through 11 years of 3D. And most of the days, I feel like this fella here. I feel like time is standing still or I'm not making progress. So this process just takes a lot of time, and there's no way to put that differently, at least not for me. Maybe I'm doing something wrong. It takes dedication and also a lot of decisions against money in my case. So I turn down commercial projects to have time to do stuff for myself. And for me, that's totally worth it. For today, I created this little piece. You can imagine it like this construct here is me opening up to the audience and to show the mess that is inside of me. And I made that with a few techniques that I'm using most of the time, and I want to tell you something about them. I want to tell you how I'm adding 3D assets, how I'm setting them up. I want to show you something about texture blending, about how I am scattering plants in my scenes, and how I am setting the mood. So let's go into Cinema 4D. So this is how I'm setting up most of my projects. You can see here super basic structure actually, with the main object that is here, the plants that are here, the environment, and the lighting, and of course some cameras. So let's go into this first camera here. And there you see the main object that is in here, and that is those stones, that pile of rubble. And I want to show you the shader that is super basic. I just import Quixel Megascans and put a little color correction on it, and maybe a little ramp for the roughness map. But I always take this new range minimum from a standard value of 0 to -1. Just a very little trick, but what that does, you can see it here. This is with the standard setting, and this one is here with the -1. And it might not seem like something too specific or too great, but if you're taking a look at these assets from a greater distance, you will get a very, very sharp look that you normally don't get, especially when you crank up the displacement to a higher value. Your assets can get a bit of a bulgy look, and I try to avoid that with just this little one setting. The second one I want to show you is how I'm scattering plants. So you can see there are two scattering objects. One are the big plants, the red dots here, and the second one are the small plants, the blue dots. There's a random rotation on both of them, also some fields, but that is not so important now. What is important are these two distribution deformers here. I have a noise in both of them, and it's the same noise for the big plants and for the small plants, but it is inverted in both of them. So this one goes from black to white, and this one goes from white to black in that way. So, and when you then select both of these and go into the noise, you can here adjust the setting for both of the noises and just play through and have full control over it. You can put in textures, you can put it whatever. But I like to have these noises and to play around with them. And what I did here for the small plants is that I increased the brightness. So with that, you can super easily adjust your whole scene and play with the scattering. So I've also pre-rendered two little images. One looks like this, one looks like this. And what you can see here, it doesn't really change. It doesn't change the scattering itself. That is done by another setting, but it can change the whole distribution and give you another look. So let's move into a very important part, and that is how I am layering textures. This is the floor that you saw in the beginning, in the front of the building, and when you put a normal texture on it that looks like this, then so it's just again a texture from Quixel Megascans. Then the floor will look like this, and you can see now already that there you have tiling. It's always these. I guess it's 2 by 2 meters, and that is, of course, when you do a big landscape, it's not what you want to have. You want to have it like non-tiling and super smooth, and maybe even a bit of different colors, like you have in real world. You have different minerals and some moisture, and I don't know what. And to imitate that, I'm just taking the same shader all over again 3 times, and I plug in a little constant here that is triggering the rotation of the textures, and then I'm mixing this whole thing with, again, noises. And when you do that, then it will look like this. And the cool thing about it is, no matter how far you are away from your floor, you will have no tiling. You just can't see it anymore, and you're only using one texture. But with that little noise, you're really getting a much better result. So now for the last piece, for the last technique, let's go into the lights here. I'm using a very, very basic setup, actually. It's only a sun and sky rig, where let me show you pre-rendered. Looks like this. When the environment object is off. And the environment object is really, for me, the most important part of setting the mood. So let's turn on the background here again. And there are some lights for the object here. And then I have one light source that is controlling the fog. So it's, when you take a look at it from here, you see it's only this one big light source, and as soon as I turn the environment on again, you can see that this light source is only contributing to the volume and creates then a look like this. I also have it pre-rendered, and you saw it already. So that really helps. And the good thing about when you have these foggy, moody images is that that you can really set apart the foreground from the background, and you can create layers and really help the viewer to understand your image better, and you can really lead the eye of the viewer. So these are a few techniques that I wanted to show you. But we are not ending on this technical stuff. I want to go back to something emotional. It's a very dreamy and abstract piece that I made, again, with my, as I call it, the noise in space technique. And the idea with that piece was just to create some visual poetry. Thank you very much for your time and your attention. And before we go into the Q&A part, I don't know if we have time for it, but there's something to win. So please scan the code, feel free to scan it and register for a chance of winning a Maxon 1 license for a year, I guess. And for any questions about that or regarding Maxon, you can speak to the Maxon team that is present here after the talk. Thanks. Ah, there's a question. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. I'm using still the older Espresso notes because I am really working a lot with the Quixel Megascans. And for me, I don't think it is possible to get the new system running with that. So yeah, I'd like to switch to the new ones actually, and sometimes I do for other shaders. But when I do landscape projects like these, that's still the only possible way to go. Mm-hmm.
How much of your personal time you distribute for like personal projects and for work freelance?
I'd say it's something like, I try to make it 50-50. Sometimes it's more for commercial work because I have to pay the bills. But yeah, I try to really spend as much time as possible on my personal stuff. But I'd say something between 75-25 or 50-50 in that area. Yeah.
Did your personal work influence the types of projects you do?
Yes, it did. I already made a few projects with that noise and space stuff for some key visuals for clients. And I'm also working on some landscape projects. So yeah, it really helped me so much to get out with that and to get then also approached for projects that could be looking the same.
Can I ask what kind of clients do you attract?
I'm currently working with one client that I have since 7 years. That is Lego. I am making illustrations for Lego figures. So in that case, that doesn't influence this kind of work. But I already worked with an artist in Barcelona and worked on some landscapes there. And currently, I'm working for like a science client, and they really need super precise shaders. So yeah, that definitely helps to show that you're able to handle certain kind of projects. Yeah. Yes.
Are you doing the sound design or like the music for yourself?
I'm getting most of the sounds online on audio takes like the YouTube audio library, or what was it, Pixabay, where you have like free sounds. But if you remember the very first project that was being exhibited last year in Frankfurt, I was working with, it was with OBJ Studio, and the sound was done by Off Grid. So it was a sound studio where they made a sound experience around this work with 16 channels, super surround stuff. Was really cool. So yeah. But the thing is, when I'm making personal projects and I have it rendered, okay, I just want to have it. I want to have it done and I want to have it out. So I'm looking mostly for stuff like that and try to loop it within After Effects, which is a very hacky thing, but it works. Yeah. Yeah.
How much post-work are you putting into your work? Because those really nice movie pictures look like as if you would do some post-work to them, or are you trying to get them all done in rendering?
I try to get as much as possible done in Cinema 4D in Redshift. The only thing that I do in post-production actually is some color correction, maybe, especially with the noises where you can do selective color correction to crank up the contrast between the colors. But for the landscape stuff, I try to get it done within Redshift as much as possible. But I'm using also some denoiser and maybe I'm scaling the images up if I need it in 4K. That's stuff that is being done in post. Yeah. Yep.
You're doing a lot of landscapes, right? How do you combine the stones with the ground? So are there little stones around big stones, or is there some technique to combine the big stones in the landscape?
Mm. Yeah, that's always a bit of a hacky area, I'd say, because you have your scanned assets like a pile of rubble or I don't know what, and you have the ground around it. So what I normally do is that I'm sculpting the ground around it and really sculpt it to the single stones. So maybe when you have these piles, you always have a piece of ground under it until the first stone is starting, and I try to pull the ground until the first stone really starts. And with that, you can kind of blend it. Yeah. Yeah, you found it. Sorry? So far, I haven't done that, but I have made my own stones. So basically, I have the whole setup at home to make my own textures. The only thing is I need to find time for it, but that's definitely a goal for this year or maybe next year. Yeah. The current projects are in ACES, but to be really honest with you, I have no idea about color spaces. If that answers your question, I don't know. Yeah.
Could you maybe share a bit of how your 3D scan setup looks like? Like, what do you use?
My 3D scan setup is a camera, a Sony Alpha 7R2, I think. Just a camera with a very that creates very large images, like 60 megapixels or so. And then I have a little turntable, and I put the object on the turntable, and then I just do one step by the other, and I'm taking the photos, and then I'm turning around the object, and I'm taking some more photos. And then you have maybe something like 400 photos or so. And then you put it into a program, how was that called? Reality capture, I think. Reality capture. And there the program really makes a very good model, and a very highly dense model with millions of polygons. And after that you have to put it into ZBrush. And in ZBrush, which is very complicated for me, but I have this one single workflow that I know in ZBrush, where you can bring the poly count down. You really make these low poly models, and then ZBrush will calculate the displacement map that is really like the difference between a low poly model and the high poly model. And then you can put on the displacement map on your low poly model again, and then you have a displaced object. And that really helps to have it animatable and to make simulations with them, because you need a low poly count for that. But to have the detail in it, you really need the normal map and the displacement map that is both being created in ZBrush. Yeah. Yep.
How big of a role did getting a degree play for you to get to your position, like in terms of personal development and career?
The degree itself didn't play any role at all. I got in by just, I think, as I said, for me, the internship was the most important thing. But in the end, it's something that you learn autodidactic. I'm on YouTube all day and watch tutorials, get out with the stuff. So nobody ever asked me about my degree, actually. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, yeah.
So, but you're still using ACES. Is there something like color science aside, just something about it that you've identified personally that is why you stick with it, or
Why I stick with the old layout? It's just because I'm used to it. Oh, that's a difficult question. No, of course, everybody was talking about ACES. You got to use ACES, 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 and I got a little bit into it. But really, to be honest, I don't have any knowledge about that yet. Something I want to dive in, but in the end, especially when it's client projects, I have to get it working and get the stuff out. So, yeah. 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 Yeah, right. Yeah, there was a difference. Yeah, it looked maybe a bit different, and maybe I had a little bit of more possibilities in the post when I was using the tone curve, that I had more details in it. But yeah. Yeah. As I said, I really try to. The thing is, when you tackle so many different things, I lose overview, and I try to stick what I know, and I try to really get that done properly. That helps me to get my stuff done. Everything else is something for the future, and hopefully I will get into that. Yeah. Yep.
You talked at a certain moment about rules you establish for a project.
Yeah.
Do they change project to project, or stay?
Yeah, of course they stay. I mean, or they change. Like when I started, I was really using a ton of different light sources, and that is really something that I'm changing now, and that I really try to get rid of the unnecessary stuff, because as I said before, the more stuff you have, the more distractions you have, and you really lose what is the actual what do I want to say in this image or in this animation. So I'm really trying to bring things down to the very fundamentals. Yeah.
Why do you use Cinema 4D? Do you ever compare it to other 3D
Yeah, I mean, when I was studying, I was learning a bit, just one semester or maybe two, of Maya, and we did some modeling in there and also a little bit of animation. But then the studio where I had my internship, they were using Cinema 4D, and since then I stuck to it. And I've also tried out Blender. I did the donut tutorial. But of course, it feels weird when you're so used after a few years to one project, to one program, to change to another one. Yeah, I mean, I hear a lot about people switching from Cinema 4D to Blender, but for me, Cinema 4D is, my program. I know it now, and it's super easy to handle for me. Yeah. Yes. I'd say since maybe 3 years or so. So 4 to 5 years, maybe. Of constant powering, yeah. I mean, as much as you can, as much as your body and your brain can handle. Of course, you need some time off. That's very helpful. Something I didn't understand for a very long time, to stay away from the computer at least for a few weeks a year. Something like 5 years. Yep. So Cinema 4D is always the first program that I open when I go into my office, and always the last one that I close. So per day, maybe it's actively using 8 hours or so, I'd say. And well, it's getting less of watching tutorials. I always try to stay up to date when there's a new release of Cinema 4D, and I definitely always watch them. But yeah, and I used a lot of the tutorials from Vincent Schwenk, if you know. I really learned a lot about that. So if anyone is still starting, this is the guy who can teach you how Cinema 4D and Redshift works. Really very, very good stuff. Yeah. Yep. A classical job position, to be honest, was never an option for me. Because when I started with the internship, I saw these two guys really doing their own kind of business, and I was always surrounded by people who were running businesses themselves. And I rather like it to have maybe something smaller, but I do it myself rather than being this teeny tiny wheel on a very big project, so that I can call it my own stuff. So yeah. Yeah. The new particles? Not yet. Not yet. But it looks promising. I saw the presentation at the OFF festival from Ellie Wade, and that looked very, very cool. So definitely something to go into. Yeah. All right. So thanks again for your time and your attention. Have a good day, and hope to see you around. If you see me, let's talk, have a beer, have a coffee. Thanks.